which comprises of students from management, humanities, social sciences, and to discuss grounded theory with such a diverse gentry is both an opportunity as well as a challenge. Now, I think that most of you would be wondering that why it is that we have placed grounded theory in qualitative research methodology. Like, can anyone share me that why it has been placed in qualitative research methodology? Okay, I think uh, anyways, you can also write your response in the chat box.
Sir, could you repeat it again? What did you say? Actually, I was not able to do.
Yeah, my question is very simple. I'm just asking that can you tell me like your viewpoint that why it is that grounded theory has been placed in qualitative research methodology section? Anyways, we will try to discover it in my next slides, which I will be presenting with you. I think everybody is able to see the slides.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Now I am feeling alive, because with no faces and no voice, I was feeling that whether I am connected with live beings. But thank you so much for your response. I will be taking up with you this interesting topic, and we will parallelly try to see in this section some of the interesting issues at hand. Now, if I may ask you one thing, and all of you are aware with this, that you have already, I was going through the schedule, and most of you have already gone through many topics before this section. And if I am right, some of the topics which you have already gone through is on focus group discussion, questionnaire, interview schedule, case study. Before this topic which we are going to take up on grounded theory, isn't it so? Isn't it so? I think these topics have been discussed with you. Focus group discussion.
Sir, FGD is kept for their home assignment. That will be given to the later on, because for the Holi, I shifted the topic for the later part of the course.
Okay, okay. But I think case study and other
Yes.
things have been discussed.
Yes.
Okay. So, whenever we are discussing about a new methodology, and when I'm talking about methodology, I'm using it in a very, very wide sense. Methodology here is not erroneously what is assumed, that people equate it with merely methods. But here, when I am using methodology, it is used in a wider sense to include epistemology, ontology, logic, and then, yes, definitely methods. And we will try to see that how here is a grounded theory method, which incorporates, and we will see the distinction, what it has on all these four counts, and why it is a distinctive methodological approach which we are talking about. Another thing which question comes, and that I will always request you to look into, whenever you are dealing with a new method, you always need to think that what is peculiar about it. Why it is that we are needing a new method altogether to look at the reality. Or in other words, how it is that the other methods are insufficient in some or the other way, that we are requiring a new method altogether to look at. That will make your concepts more clear, and you will have greater clarity in understanding it. In the same vein, I will be taking up with you and I will discuss with you when I am talking about that why do we need a new methodological approach, where and how far the existing methodological approach are insufficient to answer those questions, that we need grounded theory as a new methodological approach to look at the social reality. Now let me start with three illustrations. And from these three illustrations, I will enter into grounded theory. These three illustrations will point out the limitations of existing methodological approach and why it is that they are insufficient to answer these questions, thereby leading to search for a new method altogether, new methodological approach altogether. And I will give you three concrete examples. One from the domain of sociology of religion, which is my core area of, or we can say my area of specialization. Second, from gender studies. And third, from sociology of education. And in all these three examples, I will be illustrating to you that how it is that the existing methodological approach are not able to do justice. And therefore, we need a new methodological approach to look at them. When I was conducting research on new religious movements in India, and my case study was on Sahaj Yog, which was started by Srimata Nirmala Devi. And that was an ethnographic work which I was conducting as a doctoral student in Jawaharlal Nehru University. I did my review of literature, and there I was fascinated, and I created one chapter called Commodification, Packaging, and Consumption of Spirituality, where I was trying to look into that how these new religious movements packages their programs, and that is being commodified and sold to the devotees. It was guided by my review of literature. I attended one of the 4 days international puja, which was organized by Sahaj Yog, went to Greater Noida to participate in that. The first day gone, I was curious because I really wanted to interview the leader of, or the charismatic leader, Srimata Nirmala Devi, and I was told when I was buying the coupon of 4,000 that she will be coming. And as a young doctoral student, spending 4,000 out of your doctoral fellowship, I think all of you can understand how tasking it is. First day gone, she was not there. Second day, I was becoming all the more nervous. I started asking fellow devotees that when is she going to come? They told she will be coming. The third day came and I was all the more nervous. I was feeling like as if I went to a market, I paid certain amount and I am now being cheated. The fourth day came and now I was hopeless that she is not going to come. I started inquiring with some of the people that with those with whom I was a little comfortable, that don't you feel that we were sold these tickets with the promise that Srimata Nirmala Devi will be coming, and now that today is the winding up session on the fourth day, there's no sight of her. Then some of the seasoned devotees told me, and that was again an eye-opener for me. They told me that, my dear, you are looking at it from the point of view of as if a market exchange is taking place. But what we gave was with the spirit of Dan. You know, Dan, the word Dan. Generally, Marcel Mauss in The Gift writes that there are 3 kinds of exchange which we look at. And generally, in this exchange, in the market exchange, there is a very clear commodification. You pay this much, you get certain things. In gift exchange, you have this idea of reciprocity. Reciprocity in the sense that when young kids or anyone goes to someone's birthday, they give them certain gift and in anticipation expects that they will also be getting return gift. In marriages, people go, they pay certain thing and then they expect that they will be getting. So there is an element of reciprocity. But here is an idea of Dan which is altogether different. There is no expectation here that you will be getting certain thing. But what was happening here in my research, I was trying to fit a round hole in a square peg. I was trying to fit with my limited vocabulary, which I gained from my review of literature, to fit into my field experience, which definitely was not in tune with the reality of the field. Just because I was not having conceptual armory to situate my experience or the devotee's experience, I realized the limitation of proceeding to the field with a priori categories. How at times, instead of illuminating us, it also uh, becomes a hindrance. The second illustration, I think, and then I will come into the point that I think I am audible and you are able to understand what I am speaking.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The second illustration comes from gender studies. I don't know how many of you are aware with the fact that there are few tribes where you can find that prostitution is a tradition. Now, suppose if you go with the usual standards of morality and you go to these tribes, and I will come to it one by one, and ask question based on, say, for example, either the commercial angle, that is human trafficking, from which generally prostitution has been glanced at, that how trafficking, coercion, and prostitution has been looked at. Violence is intrinsic to this. And you go with these dominant categories, which has a inherent assumption that those who are into prostitution are doing so against their will. They have been trafficked, they have been coerced, and therefore they have entered into this. Now, but there are places in India where prostitution is not only the main or the only source of income for the entire family, but that the profession is actually passed down through the generations. The Bachara tribe from western Madhya Pradesh is famous for treating prostitution as a tradition. It is the father's brothers who acts like pimp, and they take care of all the arrangements. The second example is of Nanak Purvas, a small village in Hardoi district in eastern Uttar Pradesh. Children in these village know only their first names, and most don't even remember their first names. Not surprising, the children of these villages this village is generally termed as the village of bastards. Another place is the Wadia village in North Gujarat. It is famous for its prostitution. With the birth of girl child, there is celebration because it means that a breadwinner has come for the family. Now, the point is, and recently one of our scholars, she was trying to understand the Nuts tribe, and she resorted to grounded theory approach. I suggested her to resort to grounded theory approach because the literatures which are available, they are actually being guided by different assumptions. Here, when you look at it, there is a family, there are a bunch of people who are voluntarily from generations practicing this as a family occupation. The usual categories which you get from the review of literature will not suffice, will not do justice with the field experiences of these people. And as Thomas Kuhn would say, that generally the normal science is the puzzle solving activity. We have certain paradigms and we try to fit our experiences into those paradigms. Whether they are an aberration, that hardly matters, but we tried, the paradigm is unquestioned. But many a times we find that experiences, when we go with the a priori categories to the field may not be in tune with those categories. Third example I would like to give it to you from the domain of sociology of education. And for that, I will show you a small video, two small videos, and then I think that I will need some responses from you. Then only I will be able to proceed further. Are you all able to see this video?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Eu não escutei quem me muda cá. Eu não
Sir, we can't see the video.
You're not able to see the video?
No, sir. Not visible.
संस्कृत के तस्वीर है यहाँ पर बच्चों के पढ़ाने के तस्वीर है, डॉक्टर के भी तस्वीर है, पानी पीने के तस्वीर है, सब चीज के हमारा देखिए नहीं, खेत एक धूप नहीं है, राशन
Were you able to see the initial part, or it was not visible from the starting? Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
देखिए नहीं, खेत एक धूप नहीं है, संस्कृत के तस्वीर है यहाँ पर बच्चों के पढ़ाने के तस्वीर है, डॉक्टर के भी तस्वीर है, पानी पीने के तस्वीर है, सब चीज के हमारा देखिए नहीं, खेत एक धूप नहीं है, राशन काट देता है तो 5 दिन दिया है और फिर बंद कर दिया।
बच्चा लोग को ठीक तरह से परवरिश नहीं हो रहा है, बच्चा को न कपड़ा जुटता है और न किताब जुटता है और न ही बच्चे लोग को अच्छी तरह से पोषाहार मिलता है। पढ़ने के लिए जाना चाहिए तो चला जाता है लोग मट्टी कोड़ने, बालू कोड़ने, मतलब मजदूरी के लिए बच्चे लोग
It's
को
not
भेज दिया
visible.
जाता है गाँव में कि मतलब बच्चा लोग मजदूरी करे तो तू पैसा
Something is problem.
घर में चूल्हा जलेगा। अगर बच्चा हमारा पढ़ेगा तब ना आगे चलकर कुछ बनेगा, विकास होगा। और जब बच्चा को हम काम पर भेज दिए तो वो बच्चा पढ़ेगा कि काम करेगा, दो रोटी का मतलब भूख मिटाएगा कि मतलब पढ़ेगा। इसी परेशानी से बच्चा लोग नहीं पढ़ रहा है।
भारी तो समस्या है कि यार नजदीक में लड़कन को पढ़ाने के लिए कोई इंतजाम नहीं है। कॉलेज स्कूल है भी तो दूर है, छोटा छोटा बच्चा जा नहीं पाते हैं। बाप महतारी काम के लिए जहाँ काम हो इस घड़ी बहुत दूर में
ला रहा है, काम पे ला रहा है,
के जीवन पालन करते हैं हम लोग। न दवा बेचता है। हम लोग जब भी यहाँ बीमार होते हैं सर, शिकार हो जाते हैं एकदम, ऑटोमेटिक शिकार होना है। यहाँ से हॉस्पिटल हमारा 10 कोस जाना पड़ेगा, झाझा 10 कोस इधर जाना पड़ेगा, सुइया 10 कोस जाना पड़ेगा, चाहना जो हमारा प्रखंड है, पैदल जाना पड़ेगा, गाड़ी को कोई चलना नहीं।
कोई टीका नहीं आता है देने के लिए, कहता है कि उतना दूर जाएगा, थक जाए,
वहीं से घुर गया, कहाँ से खिलाई खाना।
इसमें से कोई मास्टर बनेगा, इसमें से कोई मास्टर बनेगा, मास्टर बनना ना बेकार, जरा पढ़ लो लिख लो यार, जरा शिक्षक बन लो यार, रोजी जाया करो, रोजी जाया।
भाई नहीं है, कोई मेरी माँ नहीं है, सिर्फ मेरे पापा है। जब हम लोग 1 साल के थे, 9 महीना के थे, तभी मेरी माँ डेट करी थी। तो हम लोग समझते थे पापा कितना मुश्किल से हम लोग के पाले पोसे। उनको भी शौक था कि लड़का नहीं है तो क्या हुआ, लेकिन लड़की प्राय जैसा रहेगा।
पढ़ लिख के क्या होगा?
पढ़ लिख के बनेंगे डॉक्टर, सबके इलाज करेंगे गरीबों को। मास्टर नहीं बनेंगे, पढ़ेंगे, बच्चा लोग के पढ़ाएंगे, सर लोग के साथ घूमेंगे। मैं पढ़ लिख कर डॉक्टर बनना चाहती हूँ, मैं पढ़ लिख कर शिक्षक बनना चाहती हूँ, मैं पढ़ लिख कर इंस्पेक्टर बनना चाहता हूँ, मैं पढ़ लिख कर सैनिक बनना चाहता हूँ, मैं पढ़ लिख कर जज बनना चाहती हूँ, मैं पढ़ लिख कर वकील बनना चाहती हूँ,
मैं पढ़ लिख कर एयर फोर्स बनना चाहता हूँ,
मैं पढ़ लिख कर मिस इंडिया बनना चाहती हूँ।
से आता है बच्चा,
मुझे नहीं आता।
उसके साथ साथ यदि टीचर लोगों को थोड़ा
पता वो तुम तुम्हारा कैसे बैठो।
यही सर बोलते हैं हम लोग को, और हम लोग कहते हैं कि हम लोग को चमार खाता है, तो बोलता है टीचर लोग बोलती चमार है तो क्या बोलेगा।
मेरे मास्टर साहब नहीं अच्छा से पढ़ाता है, सब लड़का के आगे बैठाता है, मेरे पीछे बैठाता है और बोलता है कि तुम लोग चमार है, पीछे बैठ।
बच्चे लोग अपने ग्रुपिंग में बैठ जाते हैं, जैसे किसी से ज्यादा बच्चा को लगाव रहता है तो साथ चाहता है कि हम साथ बैठे हैं, इस तरह से बैठ जाता है बच्चे लोग।
सर वीडियो पॉज हो गया।
वो नहीं बैठना, पीछे बैठ।
बच्चे सबका प्यारा है, बच्चे सब जाती तो बच्चे के साथ नहीं ना कर सकते हैं। हाँ सर, ये देखने को मिला तो हम बोल रहे हैं ना कि बच्चे लोग जैसे जैसे आते हैं अपना ग्रुपिंग बना के वैसे बैठ गए हैं। हाँ ठीक है, तोड़ देंगे हम लोग अब वैसे ही बैठाएंगे, मिला करके बैठाएंगे।
तो हम लोग सोचे थे कि कॉलेज में अगर जाएंगे तो वहाँ ये सब भेदभाव तो नहीं रखेगा,
क्योंकि वहाँ सबको देखेगा एक रंग में तो बोलेगा सब कौन है, ना है चमार ना हिंदू, उस समय तो पता नहीं चलेगा। लेकिन फिर भी हम लोगों को ना जाने अपने
टीचरों का बर्ताव हमारे, हम उनको पढ़ाई करते हैं ताकि
Okay, I just wanted to show you a small clip of education in a part of India which is mediated through caste discrimination, which require enormous effort to make one's living. And despite those efforts, you see these young kids, when posed a question that what they want to be, it is not the absence of dream, but it is despite these dreams of becoming doctors, engineers, Air Force pilots, teachers. Unlike the theories which we have been talking about, the Oscar Lewis culture of poverty, talking about that how the poor are trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty and then there is immediate gratification, all those things. Here is a situation you see that despite all odds of life, you see that these students have a very, say, goals which we nurture with all the resources at our disposal. Another clip I will show you, and then I will come to the moot questions which I want to pose to you.
Now, the video of a young Dalit student being mercilessly beaten in his class recently went viral, with many calling for action to be taken. Speaking to NDTV, the boy said he was beaten almost every week by two brothers.
Well, the reason? Because he was Dalit and he did well in class. But now, after this video went viral and a case was filed, his family has faced threats too. And he has stopped going to school. You can hear him speak about it himself.
क्लास से मतलब कि मैं पीछे बैठता था एग्जाम में, तो मुझसे मुझे ज्यादा मार्क्स आते थे, तो मुझे टॉर्चर करता था या बैठा रहता था, उससे सवाल नहीं आता था तो मुझे भी लिखने नहीं देता था, ये धमकी भी देता था। उससे 70 में 7 नंबर आए हुए हैं, मुझे 52 आए हुए हैं, तो बोलता है कि तुम मेरे आगे थे, तुमको इतना ज्यादा क्यों आता है। और जब से उसे मालूम चला कि हम SC हैं, तब और मुझे मतलब प्रताड़ित करता रहता था, या SC कास्ट को गाली देता था, दलित परिवार को गाली देता था। हम फिर देख तुमको मार देंगे जान से, तुम्हारी फैमिली को भी गोली रड ताला ये सब मतलब हमको दिखाता था।
Now, if I may ask you with these illustrations, one from sociology of religion, another for gender studies, and yet another 2 examples from sociology of education. Can you tell me what is the peculiarity about these cases? What I have discussed with you? Anyone? Any wild guess?
So, see illustration, last of the illustration.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Jahangir.
So I'm not write down this number 2 option. That only 1 and 2 write down. So again show it this illustration.
Okay, this illustration was actually about a Dalit student being beaten, and he is being beaten not because of any nuisance he has created. He is being beaten because he has done well in his class. He has scored 52, and those who scored 7, they have thrashed him black and blue. Now, the point which I am trying to say, and then we will enter into discussion here. In all these 3 cases, you will find that our a priori categories which we get from the review of literature generally are not sufficient enough to deal with the experiences which we have been talking about, be it in the field of sociology of religion, be it in the field of gender and society, or be it in the field of sociology of education. The categories which we have, generally the research studies which have been conducted have pointed out various levels of educational inequalities, but these studies have brought into focus only the end results in the form of access to education, enrollments, retention, and achievement, thereby not providing enough understanding of the processes involved. Like, it is a very typical black box understanding of education, input and output. But what happens within the black box? People are. Now, these videos show you the existential and experiential aspect of struggle. Generally, we are having fear of failure. But the second video which I showed you, it has instilled fear of success in a boy. He is being beaten because he has been successful.
Yes, sir.
We need to research these issues. Possibly, if you go with the existing review of literatures which are there, they have not captured these nuances. They have not captured these existential and experiential realities. Therefore, here comes grounded theory. Here comes the importance of grounded theory, which will help you in understanding these qualitatively different, say, field setup. Field setups where normal concepts which you borrow from the existing review of literature are not doing justice with the experiences which you are observing. You are also puzzled how much sample to take. In all these questions, you find that grounded theory becomes very, very useful. Is the slide visible to you now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, as I said, that in all the three situations from three different subfields we have seen, there was a confusion regarding sample because these are totally new cases. They are not too much in abundance. Like I told you, prostitution as a family occupation. Second question comes, the experiences which these people have are qualitatively different. You cannot do justice with those experiences with the existing armory of concepts which we borrow from the review of literature. In a similar situation, you found that grounded theory originated. Grounded theory came up in such a situation of paradox. It was first put forward by Glasser and Strauss when they were studying the social organization of dying in hospital. You know, normally when you are researching in the field of sociology of medicine or medical sociology, and you go to a hospital, you ask patients that, okay, so how are you? Are you feeling better? So what improvement are you getting from the medicines? Now imagine a situation where you have gone to a hospital where terminally ill patients are there. Terminally ill patients are generally those patients where medical system has given up. 2 months, 3 months, max 6 months. They tell the patient party that it is hardly a matter of few months or days and there is no hope now. Now in such a situation, when you go and you try to interview, you find the hollowness of the concepts, the hollowness of the theoretical perspectives, the hollowness of the paradigms through which you have approached those fields. You feel that they are not doing justice with the field. They are not doing, you feel yourself, and not only, most importantly, you find your respondent's eyes staring at you. What question are you asking?
The sound is not clear, sir.
Is it for everyone? Yeah, is it for everyone? The sound is not clear because maybe
And sound
Mr.
is
Jahan-
breaking down, sir.
Okay. I don't know why, but okay, if it happens again, you just let me know. So in these situations, as I told you, that when you are studying terminally ill patients and you pose questions like, How are you feeling? Is the medicine responding? Are you feeling better now? Now, these questions, if you look at, many a time the situation will be such that in terminally ill patients are those patients which have generally medical system has given up. You find that the doctors have given up and they have generally given time to the patient party, that it's just a matter of days or months that the patient will survive. When you go with the existing armory of the concepts which you have borrowed from the literature, this is a qualitatively different field. Many a times you will find the patients glaring at you. And you can say from the eyes that they are not from questions. How are you feeling? Are you better now? Does it make a sense to a person whom doctor has given 6 months time? Now, Lazarus faced a similar sort of situation when they were studying the social organization of dying in a medical setup. And they articulated grounded theory as a specific methodological approach in their seminal work, The Grounded Theory, which appeared in 1967. It actually incorporated Glasser's emphasis on positivism and pragmatism was emphasized by Strauss. Now, we will come to the understanding of what do you mean by positivism. Positivism is generally a branch of epistemology which feels that social sciences, by following the natural science methods and methodologies, can also discover social laws, as natural sciences, by discovering natural science method and methodology, have been successfully able to discover natural laws. So what they advocate for is the idea of objectivity, value neutrality. They follow the spirit of science, and thereby they think that there is reality out there which is external to us and which has got a pattern. So positivism, by following that, they try to find out those pattern. Glasser emphasis was on positivism, whereas Strauss emphasis was on pragmatism. And in their seminal work on awareness of dying, which later on also came up, the approach of grounded theory came up very clearly in 1967 in the book, The Discovery of Grounded Theory. And this grounded theory was a seminal contribution in the field of research methodology, because here we find that Glasser and Strauss made certain very emphatic claims. They provided a rationale to justify the idea that the gap between a social science theory and empirical data should be narrowed by firmly grounding a theory in the empirical research. As I said, instead of borrowing from the existing theory categories and imposing on the field, here they were trying to argue that the theory should be grounded in the empirical research. It should emanate from the ground, not imposed from above. They provided a logic for a grounded theory. They legitimized careful qualitative research, and they wanted to point out that how, when theory emanates from the ground, it is more closer to the existential and experiential reality. Now, what happened was that a turning point in the acceptance of the grounded theory came after the publication of Awareness of Dying. Their work on dying helped establish the influence of grounded theory in medical sociology, psychology, psychiatry. From its beginning, the grounded theory method have become more prominent in the fields as diverse as drama, management, manufacturing, education, sociology. And that is why when I started and I said that a diverse gentry like you, people from management, people from humanities, this is a theory which really cut across all these disciplines and has been increasingly being used in research in, say, social science, management, humanities, cultural studies. Now, let us come to the moot question here, that then what, according to Glasser and Strauss, is the grounded theory? Now, grounded theory, in contrast to the theory which are obtained by logico-deductive methods from a priori assumptions, here the theory is grounded in data which has been systematically obtained through research. So unlike the deductive logic, where you, from a priori assumption, you deduce certain theory, in this case, the theory is not deduced beforehand. Rather, it is a theory from empirical data which you are collecting. And we will see how through the process of coding, gradually we see that from concepts, categories emerge. From categories, we find that the theories emerge. So it is not like you are trying to impose from, as I said, trying to round goal perspective. And I give you the example of change in the real estate, like the idea of that, or in studies and understanding about prostitution as a family occupation. Discrimination as a lived reality in case of education. No a priori assumptions can do just experiences. In this case, you need to understand these experiences, and from these experiences, you need to find out the concepts instead of forcing something from outside. And therefore, by doing this, what happens? Grounded theory bridges the gap between theoretically uninformed empirical research and empirically uninformed theory by grounding theory in data. Now, this is a very seminal point which you need to understand. That grounded theory is bridging the gap between theoretically uninformed empirical research and empirically uninformed theories. Whether you follow the inductive logic or you follow the deductive logic, there are some pros and cons to it. Now, initially it was said that grounded theory emphasizes on inductive logic because it is trying to collect different, say, empirical data, and then it is trying to build up a theory. The data which is generated from the field as against the prevalence of deductive logic, where hypothesis is generated through a priori theory. But later on, we find that some scholars started arguing that initially it was understanding that grounded theory is based on inductive reasoning. But now, of late, it is said that grounded theory is based on abductive logic. Now, this is something which you need to take care of, which is a prudent mix of induction and deduction. And Octay defines this abduction as a type of reasoning in grounded theory, where inductive and deductive logics are used in a cyclical process to build a theory. A theory is derived inductively from the data, and it is confirmed deductively by seeking and examining additional data. In the sense, you go to the field or go to the organizational setup, whatever is your field, which is qualitatively different, which you know cannot be justified through the existing literatures which we have. From those datas, through the inductive logic, you have generated certain concepts, certain categories, and then again, by collecting additional data, you try to examine it. And we will see that how in the process of coding it happens, how this cyclical process continues to happen. A theory is derived inductively from the data, and it is confirmed deductively by seeking and examining additional data. Now we find that grounded theory is still evolving as a methodology. We saw that in 1967, the first experiment with these theoretical perspective started. And it will be erroneous to assume that grounded theory has just one perspective. Rather, again, as I told you, when I will be talking about methodology, I will talk about it in a broader sense, containing the issues of epistemology, ontology, logic. Logic, we have discussed that how grounded theory involves abductive logic, which in cyclical fashion uses inductive and deductive logic, which is a prudent mix of induction and deduction. We will also see in terms of epistemology, and if I may ask you what you understand by the word epistemology. Yes, anyone? Epistemology, if you are reading research methodology without understanding epistemology and ontology, it is like you are trying to understand a tree by just its shoots and leaves. You will never have conceptual clarity. That is why philosophy of knowledge is very, very important. If you look at the debates in the philosophy of knowledge, rationalism, empiricism, from Descartes to Francis Bacon, you try to understand that, and then you will be very clear that in what sort of problem, which sort of methods should be used. When we talk about quantitative, qualitative, it is all rooted into this epistemological and ontological discussion. To put very simply, epistemology is how do you know what you know? What is the basis of your knowing? Is the basis of your knowing through your intuitions? Like as positivists would say, the positivist epistemology would say that you can discover social laws as natural science has been able to discover natural laws. Whereas non-positivist epistemological position would say that no, human reality is qualitatively different from natural science reality. Like say, for example, I have this pen. I may drop 1,000 times from this height, and under the force of gravitation, I will get the same result. If I repeat it for 1,000, for lakhs time, I will get the same pattern. But if I ask some of you, say for example, if I ask Mr. Uttam that please, I have to draw a pattern, so please jump from the first floor of your institution or your home. If he is very, very teacher abiding person, maybe for once to satisfy me, he would jump, and God forbid, if he is alive, he will not jump for the second time. Now, what is the difference between this living and non-living? This living being and the non-living being? There is a huge difference. He has got gist, we have got volition, we have got conscience, we are reflexive. Whereas these objects, they are devoid of conscience, they are devoid of gist, they are devoid of volition, they don't have reflexive capacity. And therefore, we find that we can draw a pattern out of there, but not necessarily the same in the case of human being. So the non-positivist would say that human reality is qualitatively different. Similarly, the ontological position. Ontological position would try to understand that what is the nature of reality. If epistemology is trying to know how do we know what we know, ontology is trying to understand what is the nature of reality. Is the nature of reality out there, or is it something which we have constructed? In the sense, if it is out there, then the methods of natural sciences can definitely be applied to understand it. But if it is socially constructed, if it is that I and you, we have created the social reality, then we need to intuitively understand it. We need to have an interpretative understanding of it. Now, based on these epistemological and ontological positions, we find that there have been different strands of, grounded theory, which we have observed. And over the period of time, they have developed, we will discuss their major assumptions also. From Glasser and Strauss' discovery of the grounded theory in 1967, we found that how Glasser moved on to write theoretically, sensitivity. And then we also find later on the Straussian version of grounded theory, constructivist version of grounded theory being promoted by Chermas, situation analysis induced grounded theory by Clark. So different versions of grounded theory started emerging, and they were again emerges from the data when grounded theory procedures are used. Researcher maintains objectivity and minimizes bias. As I said, in positivism, the major emphasis is on what? The positivism, the major emphasis is on fastening social sciences on the basis of natural sciences. As natural sciences, by following natural science method and methodology, has been able to discover natural laws, it is believed that social sciences, by following natural science method and methodology, can also discover social laws. So what they are doing, they are trying to follow those procedures, and they were trying to maintain objectivity and minimize bias. The ontological position is, what is the nature of reality? They assume that the external reality exists and can be discovered. So in this approach, which is rooted in positivism, the ontological position is that external reality exists and can be discovered. The epistemological position is that by following objectivity, minimizing bias, by following the natural sciences methodology, we can discover a pattern. The second position is that of social constructionism. Now, this social constructionism question Glasser and Strauss' positivist conception that data is an external reality and an unproblematic concept. They fail to examine how the researcher defines, produces, and records data. The social constructionism, which was a version of grounded theory promoted by Chermas, it tried to question the positivist conception of Glasser and Strauss, that somewhere the conception that data is an external reality and an unproblematic concept, they argue that the positivists fail to examine how a researcher defines, produces, and records data. They fail to recognize how researchers' own standpoint, historical location, and relative privileges shape what they can see. Now, in this particular perspective, any social theory which is constructed in grounded theory is seen as a co-construction between the researcher and the participants. And also, it is dependent on time, space, and circumstances. So unlike the positivist, the social constructivist hinted that it is a social construction. It is relative to the time, space, and circumstances. And they use here, they do not deny the reflexivity of the researcher. You look at major classical thinkers who have been there, like say, for example, if I talk about sociology, all these thinkers were responding to their own contemporary times. And they took up issues which, one or in the other way, was closer to their lived experiences. It was not surprise that Durkheim opted to study in various form social solidarity. Living on the Franco-Prussian border and being from a minority community, that concern for social solidarity was always reflected in his different writings, be it elementary forms of religious life, be it division of labor, or be it suicide. Similarly, Marx as an activist, his concern for the then capitalist society, evolving capitalist society, the mass discrimination which was taking place, marginalization, was his concern. So we find that generally, to say that the researcher can have total objectivity and minimized bias is something is to rule out his reflexivity. Social constructionism tried to take cognizance of that. Now, the third approach in the grounded theory emerged in terms of pragmatism, which was influenced by the writings of John Dewey, George Herbert Mead, Herbert Blumer, which argued that social reality is the construction of human agency as played out through the complex web of actions and interactions. Their main arguments was that the external world is a symbolic representation,
Audio is not coming.
Probably. Sir, are you there? Due to net issue, I think that Sir is getting disconnected. Rajiv sir? Yes. Yes. The problem is that it's not, you're not getting. I'm trying to connect him again.
Yeah. Am I audible
Yes,
now?
sir. Yes, sir. Again.
I think there
Yes,
was some,
yes, yes, sir.
And after this pragmatism, we find that yet another strand started, and that was, as I gave you the picture in the diagrammatic representation, that how grounded theory, different approaches have evolved over a period of time. The postmodern situational analysis of grounded theory, which was to an extent influenced by Cherma's constructionism and Strauss' pragmatism. They wanted to understand and also address the challenges which were being thrown.
Voice is not coming.
Same problem. सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
sorry for the interruptions. I will,
Yes.
I will be sharing my slides with Arup sir, and I think for the circulation to all the participants. And I was talking about that how we find that increasingly, after we have seen that how first the approach of positivism, which was predominantly there in the writings of Glasser and Strauss, that approach of grounded theory. Then we saw that how pragmatism in the writings of Charmas, then we saw that how the issue of pragmatism was there, and in the writings of Strauss, and we also saw that how later on social constructionism, which considered reality as socially constructed, and which also argues that researcher cannot be separated from the study. Unlike the positivism, which was trying to create a veneer of objectivity, of minimizing bias, social constructionism realized that researcher cannot be separated from the study. And this perspective realized the reflexivity of the researcher. Thirdly, we saw that how Strauss and Corbin propounded later on another approach to the grounded theory of pragmatism, which accepted external reality and chose assumptions about reality that are most useful for the study purpose. And it incorporated both objectivist and the subjectivist point of view. And they also used method from both positivist and the constructivist grounded theory. Later on, we find that there is another perspective emerging up, another approach emerging up in grounded theory, and that was postmodern situational analysis, which to the grounded theory, which we find in the writings of Clark. Now, I was posing a question to you that what do you understand by postmodern turn in social research? Anyone? Any idea? What do you understand by the postmodern turn in social research? Like, if at all you can just look at, in contrast to the modernism, which was emphasizing on universality, generalization, homogenization, and permanence, postmodernism has shifted the focus to situatedness, positionalities, irregularities, fragmentation, and heterogeneity. So, unlike the quest for discovering a universal law, a quest for discovering certain body of knowledge, a quest for discovering dispassionate, impersonal analysis of the situation, postmodern turn in social research was talking about situatedness, positionality, from which position are you trying to look at the reality, fragmentation and heterogeneity. And if you look at very interestingly, science as a dominant body of knowledge on which modernity was based on, modernism was promoted, and which really became a dominant paradigm to look at the social reality. Look at the way science, accompanied through the colonial powers in India, was having that arrogance that we are the superior body of knowledge. Paul Feyerabend in Against Method writes beautifully that how science pushed the indigenous body of knowledge like allopath, like Ayurveda, Unani, Siddhi, and the yellow medicines of China to the fringe and to the margins, stating that no, these are traditional, irrational body of knowledges. And due to this, the indigenous local knowledges suffered. This hegemony of science, this hierarchization of body of knowledge on the basis of science as a dominant body of knowledge, which is certain, which is impersonal, dispassionate. But where did the Rethinking Science project started? Can anyone tell me? This Rethinking Science project interestingly started in the birthplace of science, in Europe itself. When Europe witnessed the catastrophe of the First and the Second World War, at none other place than the Europe itself, the scholars like Paul Feyerabend, Thomas Kuhn, Karl Popper and all, they start rethinking that is really science the most certain body of knowledge? If so is so, then why it is that the most barbaric act of humankind took place in the birthplace of science itself? They really started interrogating it. And we find in the writings of Thomas Kuhn that how is in his Structure of Scientific Revolution, he's talking about the paradigm shift. How Paul Feyerabend in Against Method is talking that science is another myth. It is not that scientific theories are not disproven. It is not that the scientific theory are not proved wrong. Yes, it takes time, maybe after 100 years. But if something is not true and it is proved after 100 years, does it make it that it is eternal? No, not at all. Then why are we treating it as a hegemonic body of knowledge? If science is another myth, and that is what Paul Feyerabend would argue, and therefore he talks about pluralism. This created a tectonic shift and brought the postmodern turn in social research. We started celebrating plurality of knowledge. Instead of promoting science as the body of knowledge, instead of basing science as the body of knowledge, postmodern turn in social research, it started talking about that how to understand the situatedness, positionality, celebrate the heterogeneity instead of enforcing homogenization in the name of science. Now, let me come to another interesting thing in this whole lecture, and that is in fact more, I would say, pertinent to you. What is the process of constructing grounded theory? The processes involved in conducting grounded theory research is firstly the identification of research problem. identification of the relevant context, persons, or events, theoretical sampling, data collection, memo writing, analyzing through coding, constant comparison, theoretical saturation, identifying a structure, and developing a theoretical model. Now, let me take it one by one. So, in this sense, that when we are talking about the processes involved in conducting grounded theory, a study based on grounded theory is likely to begin with a question, or even just with the collection of a qualitative data. As researcher reviews the data collected, ideas or the concept become apparent to the researcher. These ideas, concepts are said to emerge from the data. Now see, unlike earlier, a priori categories or the concept being imposed, here these concepts are emerging from the data. The researcher tagged those ideas, concepts with code, and that's very pinpointedly summarize the ideas and the concept. As more data are collected and reviewed, codes are grouped into higher level concepts, then into categories, and these categories become the basis of a hypothesis or a new theory. This whole process, I said, is basically starting with the identification of the research problem. Usually, researcher adopts grounded theory when the topic of the interest has been relatively ignored in the literature or has been given only superficial attention. As I gave you, all the three examples which I gave you were qualitatively different field experiences, were qualitatively different research problems, where existing literature were not doing justice to those existential and experiential problems, and therefore the need for the concepts which emerge from the field, and therefore grounded theory is suitable to such sort of problems. The second step is identification of relevant research context, persons, or events. After identifying a research problem, for example, how chronic illness among the homeless adolescents is an issue which has not been adequately analyzed empirically. The chronic illness amongst the homeless adolescents. This is something which you will realize it has not been studied much. Because, firstly, where to find the situation, where to locate the potential participant, what kind of chronic illness would be most instructive as a starting point for developing a first-hand understanding of the phenomena is not clear. So, in such sort of situation, where you find that it has not been much researched, we have to understand, like as I told you, chronic illness amongst homeless adolescents. Now, this is which has not been much understood. In order to, first you need to understand is that you have to understand the context. Then you have to identify the persons, where you can locate them. These are important steps. And then comes theoretical sampling. Now, this is very, very important in grounded theory. Normally, when we proceed with the research, we have a number of sampling is very, very clear. We state that we are going to have this much sample size, and there are different formulas to work out about it. Like, say, for example, where you have a very clear-cut number of census data or something, then you accordingly sample it and then come out with a representative figure and say that we will be taking up this sample for our study. But the question comes that in case of grounded theory, sampling is directed by theory. It is termed theoretical sampling because it is an ongoing part of the process of data collection and analysis, which in turn directs the researcher to further samples. Now, theoretical sampling means seeking pertinent data to develop your emerging theory. The main purpose of theoretical sampling is to elaborate and refine the categories constituting your theory. Like, while a qualitative project may contain both purposeful and theoretical sampling, purposeful sampling is not always theoretical. Glasser argues that the purposeful sampling refers to the calculated decision to sample a specific locale according to the preconceived but reasonable set of dimensions, and that dimensions can be time, space, identity, or power, which are worked out in advance of the study. Whereas, when theoretical sampling is used, they cannot know in advance what to sample for and where it will lead, because the field is qualitatively new. So what happens? Like, say, for example, awareness of dying in the terminally ill patients, which I said. You start talking to people. From that emerges concepts. From concepts emerges categories. And you keep on talking to people until the time various aspects of those concepts you are able to acquire. There will be a time when you will find that your concepts have been saturated. Now you are not getting any further dimensions of those concepts. That is where you will call that you have saturated. Now there is no need to sample, no need for respondents, because your category has saturated. That is why and here your sampling is not decided beforehand that you will be sampling 100 or say 200 respondents, not at all. Rather, it is dependent on the field. Whenever your category gets saturated, that is where your sampling will stop. And that is why the idea of theoretical saturation is also there. So another question related to this theoretical sampling also arrives. Then can we say that say sampling is a misnomer here? Because many a times we find that studies using qualitative methods in one-time cross-sectional manner of data collection with the same set of tools, items that is administered to a set of respondents. In other situation, the tools and methods are open-ended and dynamically unfolding. Data collection happens through an iterative process of repeated interviews or combination of methods. Now, but in this case where we have been talking about, in case of theoretical sampling, we need to see that when our categories get saturated, like say, for example, the idea of humiliation, a terminally ill patient feeling humiliation. Now, you will talk to people and you will come around with different dimensions of that humiliation. And there will be a time when you will find that there are aspects being repeated again and again. You are not getting any further dimensions to it. That is the time you can say that your category has saturated. Now, after this, the stage of data collection is there, where unlike the other qualitative methodologies which acknowledge only one source of data, for example, the words of those under study, as in the case of phenomenology, grounded theory research may be based on single or multiple source of data. They also include secondary source of data like life histories, interviews, introspection, observation, and memos. So multiple source of data are used here in grounded theory. And next step, and which is very, very important when grounded theory is carried out, is memo writing. Memos in grounded theory are notes that the researcher writes during the research. When you are interviewing people, you write an extended context protocol, including your impressions, your description of the setting in which you did an interview, circumstances and intriguing events in relation to the field and the interviewee. What was the situation in which they were responding? What was the surrounding? Memos in that sense are analytic notes covering all the researcher's ideas and questions about the codes that occur at that moment. And then the analysis through coding starts. Coding is again refers to the process of defining what the data are about. Unlike quantitative research, which applies preconceived categories or codes to the data, A grounded theory creates qualitative codes by defining what the researcher sees in the data. It entails reviewing transcripts or field notes and giving labels to the component part that seem to be of potential theoretical significance and that appear to be particularly salient within the social world of those being studied. Like, say, for example, when I was conducting studies on Brahmakumaris, the idea of purity was again and again coming, be it the idea of celibacy, be it the idea of behavior. Purity was one thing which was coming and again in many of the narratives which were there. Now, this becomes important for us as a researcher to look into. So, in this case, what is done? The transcript of the interviews or the field notes are again and again, the researcher goes through it and they give labels or names to the component part that seems to be of potential theoretical significance and that appear again and again in a very salient way. And coding means to develop categories, properties, and relations amongst them. Strauss and Corbin, they have argued that analysis in grounded theory is composed of three major types of coding: open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. So you see, the process which is involved here is that coding is there. From these coding, concepts are there, where codes are grouped into a concept, and from these concepts we form categories, and these categories when linked together leads to the findings or theories. Now, as I said, that the Strauss and Corbin has further divided these codings into open, axial, and selective coding. What is open coding? Open coding here in grounded theory is tentative and tends to be in a state of revision and fluidity, as we were trying to talk about the abductive logic. There are three major types of coding which we are talking here. One is open coding, where data are analyzed to develop concepts, and concepts represent an analytic impression of what is being described. So concepts provide a way of grouping or organizing the data that the researcher has collected, be it in the form of the interview transcripts. So concepts provide that way of grouping those or organizing the data. During the open coding, the data are broken down into discrete parts. They are closely examined, compared for similarities and differences. Questions are asked about the phenomena. And as Chermas has defined, that basically there are two forms of coding: initial coding and focused coding. Initial coding alerts the researcher to the potential in vivo codes which are given in the settings, and focus coding emphasizes on search for codes which appear frequently and assume greater analytic power. Axial coding, again, it takes us to the higher level abstraction, from the first order concepts to higher order concepts called categories. We have seen that how from concepts categories emerge. So a relationship is established amongst the concept obtained through open coding. This is called axial coding. And then comes selective coding, raising the level of abstraction further to theory generation around central core categories. Selective coding is the process of integrating and refining categories. The first step is integration of these central categories. Sometimes they are also called the core categories, which represents the main theme of the research. And in all these processes, you will find that there is a constant comparison. There is a constant comparison which is going on. One of the fundamental features of grounded theory is the application of constant comparative method. By comparing where the facts are similar or different, we can generate properties of categories that increase the category's generality and explanatory power. With this constant comparison, what happens? We get to refine these categories, add new dimensions to it. And as I said, that after a certain point of time, we reach theoretical saturation, which, according to Glasser and Strauss, occurs after many rounds of coding where no new categories emerge from the process. Once this point is reached, further data collection no longer is productive. When similar incidences occur again and again, the researcher may feel confident that the category is saturated. And once it is saturated, then we can say that we have got a structure, we have identified a structure to develop a theoretical model. Now, one of the important scholars, UV Fleck, has talked about the aim of coding are always twofold. Firstly, to develop and unfold an understanding of the issue or field under study, which demands an open access to what should be coded and how. And secondly, the aim is to identify an underlying structure, an organizing principle, a basic social process or core category. And in this sense, you find that in grounded theory, the theory is a set of well-developed categories that are systematically related through statements of relationship to form a theoretical framework that explains some relevant social or other phenomena. This we have already seen that how in this process, through coding, the concepts emerge, from concepts the categories, and from categories, when the core categories are linked together, it leads to a theory. Now, having said this, it is important to look at and that what are the criteria for evaluating grounded theory. Chermas has given 4 criteria for evaluating the grounded theory research: credibility, originality, resonance, and usefulness. What is credibility? What do you understand by credibility? Credibility here refers to that has your research achieved intimate familiarity with the setting which you are studying. Like, say, for example, I said organization of dying in the hospital, the prostitution as a family occupation. Has your research achieved intimate familiarity with the setting? Are the data sufficient to merit your claims? In the terms of consider the range, the depth of observations contained in the data. Have you made systematic comparison between observation and between categories? Do the categories cover a wide range of empirical observation? Are there strong logical links between the gathered data and your argument and analysis? Has your research provided enough evidence for your claim to allow the reader to form an independent assessment? If it is so, then there is credibility in your grounded theory research. Second criteria is originality. Are your categories afresh? Do they offer new insights? Because that was the very idea for which we decided to go for grounded theory, because the existing review of literatures were not giving us sufficient categories to understand those qualitatively different field experiences. So originality of your categories is very, very important here. Does your analysis provide a new conceptual framework to understand the data? What is the theoretical and the social significance of your work? How does your grounded theory challenge, extend, or refine current ideas, concepts, and theories? These answers will point out the originality of your research. Thirdly, the resonance. Do the categories portray the fullness of the situated experience? Is your category resonating the field experience of people? Have you revealed both liminal and unstable taken for granted meaning? Or just you have captured the overt manifest meanings? Have you drawn link between the larger collectivities, institutions, and individual lives? Does your grounded theory make sense of your participant or people who share their circumstances? Does your analysis offer them deeper insights about their lives and worlds? If it is so, then there is resonance in your grounded theory and it is adequate. And fourthly, it is usefulness. Does your analysis offer interpretation that people can use in their everyday world? Do your analytic categories suggest any generic process? If so, have you examined these generic process for practical implications? Can the analysis spark further research in other substantive areas? How does your work contribute to knowledge? How does it contribute to making a better world? These questions, if addressed adequately, they take us to the idea of evaluating how good is the grounded theory. How good is the grounded theory which you have developed? Now, grounded theory is not without limitation. There are many limitations also to the grounded theory. And one limitation is definitely, as we started with the flowchart, there are competing versions of grounded theory which we see. The Glasserian version, the Straussian version, the Chermazian version, then Clarkian version of postmodern say turn in research, which are confusing for researcher who want to use grounded theory as a tool in his or her research. The practical limitation is in terms of lack of clear and elaborate research design at the starting of the study, and also cumbersome process which are involved. It makes the use of grounded theory a little bit challenging. Now, with this, if you look at, we started with that how the context in which we were trying to talk about a new method altogether. Why do we require a new methodological approach? Why it is that the other qualitative methodological approach, like from case study to ethnography to focus group discussions and others, are not doing justice with the field, and therefore a need for a new methodological approach. With 3 examples, I entered into this field. One from the field of sociology of religion, another from the field of gender and society, and third from the field of sociology of education, trying to illustrate that how these are qualitatively new examples, new experiences, which cannot be captured through the existential body of concepts and theories which we have. And therefore, we need a theory which emerges from the data, which is grounded in the data. And then we came up to the Glasser and Strauss, the discovery of the grounded theory, when they were trying to understand the organization of drawing, and how they were trying to talk about that theory needs to be rooted into data. We went on to see what is grounded theory. Later on, we also tried to look into the different epistemological and ontological positions of grounded theory, be it in terms of positivism, be it in terms of social constructionism, pragmatism, or postmodern turn. Went on to see the steps which are involved in the grounded theory, coding, different stages of coding, theoretical saturation, theoretical sampling, and theoretical saturation. And then we came on to discuss what is the criteria for evaluating a grounded theory. And definitely, we ended up with the limitations which are there when we are discussing grounded theory, because of the competing versions which it had, and also because of lack of clear-cut research design, which it fails to offer. Finally, I will recommend you some of the, say, web resources which are there. And there is a whole website which is there on the groundedtheory.com. And you have certain videos of Dr. Barney Glasser which are also uploaded on there. And these web resources you can also take down, which will be useful for you to further understand it. With this, I would like to wind up my lecture now. And if any observation, comments, questions, if you have, you're most welcome to ask.